think, yeah, we're live. So Shelby, thank you for coming on again to the Onward podcast. I really enjoy interviewing you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you live. And for the first time after a really scary event.
No, I couldn't.
This is wild.
I know we're friends on Facebook, but I just didn't see your post. So I messaged you, hey, Shelby, make sure you join me at StreamYard at this time. And you're like, well, I don't know if you saw my message, but I had a seizure. And I was like, no, I had not seen that, but I just caught it now. You were in the hospital and you don't remember anything from like a couple of days in March?
Correct. Yes, so I was admitted last Monday after having complications due to the COVID vaccine, which I didn't even know of. I was not aware of this as it was happening, which is why I have no memory of it. And so I have no memory other than waking up on March 31st in the hospital, which was 3 days after I'd been there. And apparently,
you think it was from the vaccine?
Oh, yes, that's what doctors have concluded. They said this is relatively common for people receiving the vaccine, as in we've seen this before, as in this has happened to people that we've heard of before, where the chills and the vomiting and the nausea get so intense that people dehydrate themselves and then something else happens, which essentially what happened to me was an electrical short in my brain caused by a sodium deficiency. I had essentially purged all the sodium from my body by doing so much vomiting and having so much shaking and chills, and was not restoring any of it because, of course, everything I would drink would come back up and everything I would eat would come back up.
You live alone, or did somebody?
I do live alone. And so essentially what happened is friends had not heard from me for 24 hours and they knew I was ill. And I have a very dear friend who's a nurse, and they said, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. And they called EMS and police after trying to do a wellness check on me and busted my door down. So I'm getting my front door replaced as we speak. It's an absolutely wild, like I'm still kind of, and also disclaimer, words are still coming to me. My brain is still kind of putting itself back together. So there may be points in this conversation where I take a deep breath and try and remember a word. But there are parts of me that are still allowing this to be true, that are still allowing this to be a thing that actually happened, which I think can be the case with grief events sometimes.
Yeah.
Is that I am not ready to allow this to be true. And so we don't kind of keep it at an arm's length. That was a weird thing that happened. That's a story that I'm telling right now. But the fact that it is true for me, the fact that it's real for me, the fact that it actually happened, that's still landing. That's still...
Well, it's hard for it to be true too when you don't remember like 3 days of your life.
No idea. Absolutely none. People have been telling me how I behaved, who I was, how I was interacting with doctors and medical professionals, how I was interacting with them, which was kind of funny at some point.
Anything you regret?
I don't think I said anything I regret, but it was something funny that my friends told me happened pretty early on. I think the first day that I was admitted, the hospital staff said, "Oh, it's okay, her boyfriend's here." And very adamantly, one of my other friends was like, "Shelby doesn't have a boyfriend." And apparently some random man had come to sit with me very concerned about my well-being, but actually knew me not at all. And so I was like, oh my gosh, so they had to kick that guy out of the room so some of my other friends could come in and sit with me. And because of COVID, they have this rule of one guest for the entire duration that you're in the hospital. And so I could not have multiple people come see me. I could have one person come see me the whole time, the whole 5 days that I was there. And so she came and sat with me and worked on her computer. And I'm very grateful she can work from anywhere. And the day I woke up, March 31st, I said, is this a dream? Is this real? I can't believe this is real. And she would say, yes, this is real. Here's today's date. Here's what's happening. Here's where you are. Here's what happened to you. Here's how we found you. And so she would help me kind of put the pieces of the last 72 hours together, because I still have as hard as I try, as much as I reach, I cannot pull any memories forward. And they're honestly like, that may be for the best, that you never remember what happened to you, because it was pretty gnarly. It was pretty gnarly.
Wow. I mean, so you must have just passed out at home and you could have hit your head. I mean, there's so many things that I'm thinking like, well, would anyone have noticed if I was missing 24 hours? I don't know.
Right. My mom, and the only reason I think they did is that they had driven me to urgent care the day before. Like they knew that I was in some kind of medical crisis and I had gotten medications for it. And then the next day they just radio silence. And they were like, this is bad. Something's happened. And they have told me, I said, what would have happened if you hadn't found me, honestly? Because my friend is a nurse. I'm like, you would know more than anybody else. And their mom is a nurse as well. And so they both came over, rushing over. And it was interesting to be taken care of by somebody's mother. That was an interesting experience, considering my grief experience too, having lost a mom. And so it's like, what do I do when my mom can't be the person who comes to the hospital? That's a whole other thing I'm processing too, because there's massive grief there, because she's the person I wanted to see walk through the door.
Yeah.
But they said, you would have slipped from being unconscious into slipping into a coma. You would have died had we not found you.
Did you get, I have not had my COVID shot yet, but do you get a warning like you could pass out?
Yeah. But, I specifically got warnings because I have about 6 or 7 food allergies. And so they asked me to sit there and wait for a half hour after I received the vaccine, just to make sure that nothing was going to happen to me, like anaphylactic in the moment, which I didn't expect anything to, and nothing did. But they said, common COVID vaccine symptoms are fever or chills or vomiting or nausea, but usually not for everybody. My best friend, who just flew here from Chicago a few days ago, got the same vaccine that I got, and other than feeling fatigue for a few days, nothing really happened to her. So it seems to vary widely across the spectrum, and something in my body just said, no, this is not what we need or want, and full on tried to reject it to the best of its ability.
All medications that we take have all these risks.
Sure.
They list all these symptoms, but we tend to be like, that won't happen to me.
I didn't think so either. I kind of walked in, I said, I'm doing a good thing for science. And then I almost died. So it has turned into something interesting in my brain now, where I don't know that I'll be weighing heavily things like vaccines in the future. I've been told not to get the second dose, considering what happened with the first. They're like, you're 80% covered. You don't have to worry about, getting the second one, because we don't want to see you again at the hospital. We would rather not. We would rather you just, be alive. But yeah, I wonder now what will happen if forever, perhaps in the back of my mind, there will be some question of, should I actually be getting this? Should I be receiving this medication, considering what happened this one time? Or was this a freak occurrence?
How has it impacted, like, your outlook on life? I mean, just your outlook on life. You probably haven't had time to process it. It was just last week.
I think you're the most correct with that. Pinning that down. Yeah. Doing the work that I do, doing grief work, I'm like, oh, okay, so apparently something that I needed to have or needed to experience was near death in order for something to happen. And that's still coming to me. I don't necessarily believe that everything happens for a reason, and also life's events hold the meaning that we give them.
Well, this will be a better.
So this will hold a massive amount of meaning. And I asked people, I said, when I posted publicly, I said, if you have experienced near death, please send me and email me your stories. Let me know how this fits into your life, because I have a very dear friend and former partner who has autism, and she describes sorting things in her brain as keeping things in file folders and file cabinets. And when something bizarre happens that she's never seen before, she's like, I still haven't filed this yet. And I feel very similarly. I'm like, I have not figured out where, I know in the timeline of where my life it goes, but the context, it has not arrived yet. And I think it will slowly start to. This is kind of how other grief events in my life have slowly kind of formed themselves into some kind of meaning, or it's like a big conference or an arriving of multiple ideas and things that collaborate together to create, this is the meaning underneath all this, and this is what you should do with it. I do have some definite answers for the future of my life that I've come to that I'm not ready to share publicly, but also, it's like, where do you file a near-death experience at 28? When you do grief work, especially with that context. And so it's so funny, because I have clients who've already approached me saying, it's interesting, I can relate to you even more now, We have something else in common. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want that.
Yeah, I know.
And also I think it will show up in different ways to serve people.
Mm-hmm.
Having been so close to something like that, because I have never been this close to death before. I've been in car accidents. I've been, in experiences that I didn't necessarily want to be in. They were uncomfortable, but they weren't life-threatening. And this was explicitly life-threatening.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly, I could have never predicted this for myself. And I think that might be the hardest part, is that there's really, other than knowing this was the byproduct of getting the COVID vaccine, there's not a lot of answers that I have in terms of why did my body react to this? Why on this day? Why was I not even cognizant enough to be able to text my friends and family and say, hey, I need help. Somebody come get me. Like, it was just absolute radio silence the next day. And I don't remember Monday at all.
Were you getting so sick that you were starting to get concerned, like maybe you should call somebody?
Oh, sure. And that's why I had gone to urgent care the previous day, because I had migraines and nausea so bad that I just could not keep anything down. And so I knew something was happening, and I knew I was getting dizzy. I knew that I would stand up on my own axis and I would tilt. And I was like, ooh, this is bad. This is not good. But I did not realize that it wasn't a migraine. It wasn't a headache. It was actual cognitive deficiency. Your brain is shutting down. Something is happening internally that you do not want to be happening, because for the previous 2 weeks, I had my first migraines in my life. And this was pre-COVID vaccine. I have never had migraines before, but I suffered with migraines for a full week while I was out visiting my sister in North Carolina. And I have never had migraines before. And it was a thing where light was affecting me, sound was affecting me, and I would need to go in a dark room with a washcloth over my face and like 10 ounces of Gatorade and just sit there until it would come and go. But I suspect that one was about a tornado change in barometric pressure nearby, about 20 minutes away. So I suspect it was that. But again, no answers. There's a lot of no answers surrounding this. And that's very frustrating to me, because I'm a big questioner. I'm a big get to the bottom of this, solve the mystery, figure out who, what, when, where, why. Yeah. And it's not really coming, and it may never come. And so part of my work as a grieving person is going to be finding acceptance in that, or some kind of, not acceptance as in I'm happy about this, because I think that's what a lot of people misconstrue acceptance as, but acceptance as this is true. And that simply leave it at that. Is that this is true, this is real, there may be no more answers than this. And that may simply be your reality.
Well, and too, some of it takes time to, a little bit, but.
And there's a myth that time heals all wounds. I think this is going to have to be a lot of me doing heavy lifting. I have asked a very dear friend of mine to become a coach of mine. And I've been working with her as a client actually for a few years, and I'm delighted to be able to process with her, because she seems to be a beautiful container holder for big and traumatic life experiences, which is not a gift that everybody has.
No, and I'm glad you're not, you need to ask for help.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I am calling in the forces and the troops. And it's been beautifully lovely that I have been so intensely grateful for. One byproduct of this already is that I'm very grateful to be alive still. And there are so many things that are just filled with delight for me. So the fact that like Gigi's on my lap right now is like full of delight for me. The fact that my best friend flew out from Chicago is full of delight for me. People keep asking to send me mail. People keep asking to be able to support me in my work on Patreon. People are financially have made it so that I don't have hospital bills. Like the level of outpouring in this direction has been so strong. I wake up every morning continually stunned to be alive to receive it. And so that's something that's already happened. And I'm like, okay, what a wonder it is to be alive, still to be here, and to allow that to be true. I'm okay letting that be true right now. That's fun to be true. That's fun to be true. And even the fact that I'm doing an interview with you today feels like some sense of normalcy is returning. It's like, oh, I get to speak again. Oh, I get to be in a grief space again. Because I haven't been able to take clients or things for about a week and a half. So it's been absolutely wild to try to return to the life that I was building myself before, and also know that it will be forever different, which is true in grief.
Let's look at some of the comments. So I can't tell who put posted it, but someone posted, about a session about the experimental substance for COVID-19. And, I know that so this is just a movie that somebody's recommending, or a video that we watch about the shot. I know a lot of people have different opinions on the shot. And then other medications are not experimental substances, as COVID-19, experimental injection. No one takes responsibility that people willingly sign the papers. Yeah, there's going to be people that are nervous about getting the shot and people that get the shot. Let's see. Martin says, risk versus reward. People will do more to avoid grief than to receive pleasure. Every day we make decisions, and medications, etc., are risks that we make a decision if we feel that the alternative is worse.
Yeah. Can I jump in on that one, actually?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not a conspiracy theorist when it comes to COVID-19. I do believe the vaccines have been tested as much as they can be on adults. So please do not get your children vaccinated yet, according to the New York Times and other sources. I still genuinely believe I did a good scientific thing. I do not regret getting the vaccine. I hate that happened to me. I hate that I almost died. But I do not regret getting the vaccine, and I will stand firmly in that. I continue to do so. I was actually a bit bummed out when they were like, don't go get the second one. I was like, because I'm such a completist, I'm like, I'd like to finish the thing, please.
Yeah.
But nope, can't go finish it. They said you're 80% covered, just let that be true and let other people get herd immunity. But I do believe in science in this country. And also I am extremely sad that the science has been our only choice. Because we have not chosen to mask up. We have not chosen to protect ourselves. We've not chosen to socially distance in ways that other countries have. And that has been our downfall, our great downfall. We have had so many deaths in this country. And the reason I got this vaccine is because I'm a grief worker and I don't want other people to die. I have faced death myself, in the death of my mother, not from COVID-19, but from other causes. But I am also working with clients right now who have had people die because of COVID. And I said, this is so sad. We are literally killing ourselves. We are literally killing ourselves. And this is why we need to get vaccinated, to protect each other. This is not necessarily about herd immunity so much as it is about giving a crap. I'm not going to swear on your show, but giving a crap about the people that we're surrounded by and whether or not they live or die. That is basic humanity to me. So that's why I got the vaccine. And that's, talking about risk versus reward. The reward for me is that other people get to live and survive and have lives for as long as they are here on the planet. Every day we make decisions, and medications, et cetera, are risks that we make a decision if we feel the alternative is worse. And to me, the alternative is worse. I am not ready to see more death. We have had so much already, to the point where the White House is now instating assistance for funerals because there are so many. Financial support for funerals. So if that's something you're able to apply for, I encourage you to do so as well.
Thank you for sharing. I'm very sorry what you went through because of COVID vaccination side effects.
Yeah, and thank you. I am too. I'm sorry about it. I am sorry about it, but I also don't regret it. And I think that's really important to remember.
Oh, someone's asking here, which one did you get?
I hate to ask, but which one would you get? I got the Moderna vaccine. And for what it's worth, once again, my very best friend got vaccinated, and other than fatigue, nothing happened to her. So it seems to vary widely by person. That's what I've been reinforced by in the hospital as well. They're like, it really depends. It's go see what happens. That's the experimental part of it, is there's 3 different ones to choose from as of right now. And it's hard to tell which one is best or better. And I got the first one that was made available to me because I am a person as of right now, or I used to be. I've been banned from driving for 3 months because of the seizure, for fear of another one happening again. I've been driving on the side for Instacart. So I've been grocery shopping on behalf of people who cannot leave their homes in order to make income. And so I am surrounded by people on a regular basis that I do not want to die. And so I was like, as soon as I could get this vaccine, I wanted to apply for it. And so I did, and I received it, and I got the first available, which is the best recommendation we can really give anybody. And I feel weird speaking on something so scientific. So maybe, I mean, if it resonates with you, take it. If it doesn't, don't take it. And I appreciate that as well. But for me, yeah, what Martin was talking about, risk versus reward, I will avoid grief, pain, continued death in this country before I will put other people at risk unknowingly.
Yep. So I can't remember. I know I reached out to him, like you posted something on Facebook, and I reached out to you, and I think it was that you were starting a different podcast.
Mm-hmm. 2 more, actually. They haven't quite launched yet because of, well, all of this. But the first episodes are live. You can go listen right now. The first one is called Grief Book Review, and it's a podcast that literally does what it says, reviews books about grief, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, graphic novel, anything you can think of that has stories of death, dying, divorce, diagnosis, any sort of major loss in it, and how we return to life again. And then the other podcast is called Grief Seeds, and these are small ideas that when you plant them in your mind, in your heart, wherever you'd like to plant them, they help you return to life with grief in better ways. What I often tell people is I can help you live a better life with grief. Yeah. And so that's a podcast that has these tiny little ideas that I use with clients that will hopefully serve you in your grief.
Okay, so this one, Coming Back, Conversations on Life After Loss, that's not your podcast?
That is my podcast. It actually concluded in December of last year, though.
Okay.
I decided that interview format for me was a little too strenuous. And so now I've gone back to talk about myself. Okay. So if you'd like to send a grief book to review, I would absolutely love to read it and review it. I've got about 37 to go to right now. So the stack is quite high, but I love that there's more grief books in the world now than there were maybe 20, even 40 years ago. Love reviewing them. Love talking about
maybe them. We haven't really talked about this. Why do you know so much about grief? Because not everyone's maybe listened to your other 2 episodes that I've done with you.
Right. So the origin story of my grief and loss was a lot of what I affectionately refer to as the 4 years of hell. It happened the entire time that I was in college. And essentially what happened is minor instabilities leading up to major instabilities leading up to my mother's death. So my father lost his job of 19 years. And so our family was flung into financial instability for the first time ever. I came out of the closet as a queer woman in the South, which I was both accepted and not in physical, tangible, mental, emotional, spiritual ways, which was absolutely devastating and heartbreaking to me. I developed an eating disorder as a result of that lack of acceptance, to have something I could control in that experience. And then my father was diagnosed with 2 identical brain aneurysms, one on either side of his head. They were symmetrical, so we had to have 2 separate brain surgeries, one where they went in and operated on one side, let it heal, one where they went in and operated on the other side and let it heal. So there were moments where he forgot who he was. He wasn't allowed to drive. He lost a lot of the mental capacity that he had previously, and he was a structural engineer, and so he's like big math brain and very he's just a very brainy type, and I can appreciate that about him. And there were moments of time where that was lost seemingly permanently, and then it has slowly returned to him in certain ways. And then immediately after he was released from the hospital, we thought our family was in the clear. We were done receiving casseroles and doing carpool and all this other stuff, which was wonderful to receive. It was wonderful to grow up in a support network like that. And then my mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And she fought breast cancer for about 9 months to a year or so, and we thought that was gone. We were celebrating, rejoicing. They had gone on their first big trip since my parents went on their first big trip since either one of them got sick. They had gone on this like beautiful anniversary trip through Little Pink Houses of Hope, which is a charity that supports breast cancer survivors and those who are terminally ill. And then unexpectedly in November of 2013, her breast cancer returned. And in December of 2013, on December 19th specifically, the hospital called our home, said there's no more surgeries we can do. There's no more time we can afford you. At this point, you should call in hospice because she will die from this. This is the thing that she will die from. And what's heartbreaking about that, among other things, there are many things that are heartbreaking about this story, is that she lost her own mom at 22. And so she knew exactly what she was putting me and my sister through by dying as young as she did. She died at 51. I was 21. My sister was 19. We were both in college at the time. And I remember so vividly, I will never forget this conversation where she sat in between the 2 of us on the couch and was hugging us so tightly. And she said, "I just don't want to leave you. I do not want to leave you because I know what this is like to grow up without a mother, to get married, to have children, to do all these big life things, and to not have a mother standing by witnessing and advising and consoling and supporting through all of that. She's like, I know what this is like. And then she looked at my dad. She's like, I don't want to leave you either. I'm not done with you.
Yeah.
She kept resonating this idea. She's like, I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm not done. And then she died in a week, the day after Christmas, 2013. So it was this experience for 4 years, as if I was just getting hooked and hooked and hooked from left and right over and over and over again. And every time the phone rang, I would have a panic attack because I was convinced someone was dead. But because my parents' biggest wish was that I stay and finish college. So I was away from them the entire time these huge grief events were happening. They were receiving surgeries and they were being operated on, and they were going through chemo and losing their fingernails, losing their hair and all these other things. And I was so separated from that. And then my sister had gone to school closer to home. And so she was more of a witness to that. So she had a totally different grief experience than I did. But we ended up losing the same person in that. And that was, as I think I've said this in other interviews, but it was like the rug got pulled out from me, and then the floor, and then the foundation of the house, and then the very earth under my feet. And it was like there was absolutely nothing I had left to stand on, because in her death, there were ideas of God and home and faith and responsibility and my role in the household and my role as a daughter and my role as a queer person in the world that were just absolutely dissolving, fragmenting away. And I had no idea what to do with any of those ideas. It's very much like I'm trying to put these pieces together right now of what happened with a near-death experience. I'm waiting for this committee to arrive with more answers and more context, as they did when my mother died. But again, it's something, you're right, that happens with time. And it's not because time is a healer in and of itself. It's because time gives you more context for your grief.
Right.
So because your grief always stays the same size. People think grief gets smaller over time, which is garbage. And I love that myth because I love debunking it. But grief always stays the same size. It's your life that gets bigger around the grief. You live more life. You have more context for the things that happen. And so now when my friend's mom, who's a nurse, is one person who's helping bust down my door when I'm having a near-death experience, is like, this is what I remember it being like to be caretaken for by a mother again. This is what it means to have somebody else's mom care about me, because my mom is not here to care about my own, and that lives within the context and the lens of my grief. And so this is like one way that is showing up. And then my mom's sisters, my aunts, are calling. And so to hear their voice, to hear their interpretations of the situation, to hear their tears, to hear their fear, I'm like, this is what it's like to be cared by a maternal figure, and even to be taken care of by my best friends. Even to be taken care of by peers and people my age, I'm like, this is what it's like to be nurtured with love. And so it's, my mom cannot be here. And also it's like these tiny little threads of who she was are coming and arriving through different people. And so I get to experience her energy, her spirit, her care in some way without her presence actually being here. And simultaneously, I'm still devastated that she's not alive. So it's grief is a very paradoxical thing. And I'm working with a new client right now whose father just died. And she's like, this thing is just full of paradoxes, isn't it? And I said, yeah, there will be multiple things that are true all at the same time. And they are just as equal, and they can be just as devastating to each other. And that's okay. Clarity doesn't necessarily mean I've arrived at one answer.
That's true.
Clarity often means I have a buffet of answers to choose from, and different things are true on different days.
I remember you helping me so much when my kid's dad was dying.
Yeah.
And
oh God, I will always remember that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I remember talking to you about how you went back to college after your mom passed away, I think, right? And you finished that semester.
I was asked to. I graduated on Mother's Day, of all things, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
And so talking about that with you, like you know, about how hard that was, it helped me not like pressure my daughter to do something. I just gave her space and time after her dad died. So that helped me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I regret the most, is that I was asked to go back to school and I did. Because if I could have taken a year off, if I could have explored the world, even if I never got a degree, because God knows it's interesting, but it's not the most useful thing in the world to me was at the moment. I studied graphic design and communications, so I can design my own website, which is very helpful. And it helps me communicate with clients very well on the internet. And it's helped me write both of my books. But you know, the older and older I get, the more I'm like, was this piece of paper worth this much?
Yeah.
So it's a humor and a grief that I grieve simultaneously.
Yeah.
But sometimes I wish that I could have taken a year off and then returned again later, because there was just so much that I was carrying, and other people saw it, and teachers, professors saw it, and my friends saw it, and my partner at the time saw it, and it was just, God, so incredibly heavy that I wish that school was also not a part of the burden, because it didn't feel like a distraction to me. I think I thought it was, but intended, pardon me, words are hard. Actually, what happened was that I ended up burning myself out about 7 or 8 months later.
Yeah.
I've graduated, I relocated to Chicago, and then I got diagnosed with a severe case of chronic adrenal fatigue, where all of the hormones in my body just stopped producing, which is where all the food allergies came from. And so they are, my relationship to food, we can do an episode on this another day, but is very closely intertwined to the fact that my mother is dead. And so the amount that a death or a grief can stress you out or change the very chemistry of your body, very reflective in life after loss. I speak to many people who either have food allergies or flower or pollen allergies or nature allergies or animal allergies, all of a sudden as a result of living a life after loss, because the sheer amount of stress just overwhelms the tender being that is your body.
So I don't know who posted this, but it says a LinkedIn user. I lost my mom at 20 and I had to organize her funeral. I know how this is like. I graduated from 2 colleges with a master's degree as a gift for my mom, one in Poland and the other one in, is that SUNY, Brooklyn College. Grief is a feeling I know well. I have God and his amazing love.
Yeah. And I think of all the people I know that would resonate with that, my sister would be on the top of the list. It's amazing what's happened in life after loss. We've both become different pieces of our mother. My sister became the religious half, and I became her 20-something living in Chicago half. And it's been very fun, because every time our aunts, her sisters, interact with us, they're like, oh my God, you're Sandy at different ages. And so it's been really fun to see. And so I have more or less distance myself from traditional ideas of God and religion. I was raised in a Christian household, and it was not kind to my queerness. It actively rejected my queerness, which is why I love seeing creations like Lil Nas X's new video, of kind of giving the finger to Christians who are like, you're going to hell, because that's the message I received over and over and over again for 4 years. So I went the other way with Christianity. It's not a thing that's not my favorite flavor at the moment. But for other people in their grief and loss, this is the thing. That is the rock. This is the source of divine energy and love that they cling to. And one of my very best friends is a Christian, and the way that she sees and interprets God feels healing to me. And so it is as if I am healing my own relationship to God and to Christianity through her and her relationship to God and Christianity, because of how she has leaned on God in her grief. And so it's been fascinating to me. Again, time provides context for your grief in your life. I'm getting all these God cushions built in that surround the experience of grief. It's like, maybe God is not as harsh of an experience as I was told to believe growing up. So there's definitely reframing happening there, which is beautiful.
Hi, Cassia. Okay, it's you. Okay, I was wondering who that was.
Wonderful. And thank you for saying hello. I appreciate people that come on live.
Yeah, I know. Let us know that you're here. So these are your 2 books, Your Grief, Your Way, and Permission to Grieve.
Let's pull them out so y'all can see the covers, because that really helps when you're looking them up on the internet. These are my personal copies. This is Your Grief, Your Way. This is a daily guidebook for grief, a year of practical guidance and comfort after loss. This is a God-free daily devotional, because there aren't many of these that are on the market. There are so many grief devotionals that include religious text and verses, and a lot of, again, that resonates with a lot of people. But for some people, it's like, wow, that's way too much God, or I believe that God is the person who took my person away, and so I have a really conflicted relationship with him, or what have you. And so these are collections of quotes, inspirational quotes from other authors, from other grievers, and then practices. So at the top of every page, you'll see a quote and then just commentary, my interpretation of the quote, and here's what it means for you and your grief. And then below it, you'll find an exercise that corresponds to this. So it's like every 2 days, there are exercises that are married to these inspirational quotes, and it takes you through a whole year of grief. And you can play roulette with it. You don't have to read it all the way through. You can just flip open a page and say, this was what I feel like doing today. Or you can be really committed to it and read every single day all the way through. I did have people who bought it in January of this year and have reported back and told me I've read this every single day this year and I won't break my streak, which is really fun. Such a neat way to interpret this. And I wrote the entirety of this, Your Grief, Your Way, in the first 3 months of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So this is a book that is informed by not only death, because this is for life after losing someone to death. This is not for divorce, diagnosis, all the other losses. You could certainly try to apply it to that, but it has a lot of talk about your loved one and who the person is that you lost in here. So there's seen through the lens of death, but then it's also seen through the lens of the pandemic, as in we are not able to be as close to each other as we can be. So how do we grieve well in the midst of that? So this is a part of Your Grief, Your Way also. And then my first book, my dear tender child, is Permission to Grieve. Caution, not everybody can handle this, but there are swear words in the first 2 chapters of this book because I retell the story of my mother's death, and I definitely swore during her death because grief is a swear-worthy event. But for the rest of the book, this gives you permission to do 3 things in the aftermath of loss. Permission to feel, because we often don't give ourselves permission to feel the emotions that we're experiencing. Permission to be, which is about changing identity, allowing yourself to become a different person as a result of your loss, because you inevitably do. You must grieve the person you used to be, and you must become the new iteration that grief is making you. And then permission to do at the end of the book, which is about taking action out in the real world, whether I want to start a foundation, I want to memorialize them through a bench, I want to always wear a necklace or rings or something that expresses them out in the physical world so I feel like they're still here. I want to hang pictures of them in my house. And oftentimes we don't give ourselves permission to do that because we think people will think we're weird or freaky or not over it yet, or all these other misperceptions. And so this is a lot about grief not being here to harm you, but grief being here to change you and to impact you, because what grief essentially means, again, I'm not going to swear on your show, is that you give a crap. Grief shows up because you loved, you cared, you respected, you honored, you had wishes, you had hopes, you had dreams, you had all of these things that make you have these big emotions about losing someone, losing a dream. This is for death, divorce, diagnosis, losing dreams, major moves, geographical relocation. This is about all the types of grief that you can possibly have in your life. And it says in this book, you'll learn how society encourages us to practice life rejection and self-abandonment instead of expressing our grief. We're told to put ourselves away instead of allowing grief to arrive. The 3 big permissions, be, feel, do, to unlock emotions, identities, and actions that our grief wants to express, featuring insights from podcast guests and Shelby Forsythia's personal grief community. So you'll hear quotes from Coming Back on here, the podcast, as well as I gathered a private Facebook group of grieving people to tell me, I'm like, what do you need to hear in this? And so their commentary is in this as well. And then tips and tricks for practicing permission to grieve in the real world, including how to ask for permission to grieve from friends, family, and coworkers, and tools for helping others tap into their own permission to grieve. So as we give ourselves permission to grieve, we can also kind of put on display, so you've done this, I've done this through my work as well, is give other people permission to grieve because we are giving ourselves permission to grieve. Mm-hmm. And you don't necessarily have to hand somebody a piece of paper and say, hi, now you have permission to grieve. That's a little authoritarian. That's a little authoritarian. You certainly could if you wanted to, and that's a fun exercise to do, actually. It's like, I give you permission to, and you can write your own permission slip for grief. But there are also a lot of inadvertent ways to ask people, how would you feel the most permission to grieve in this moment? What does your heart need today? Or how are you doing in this moment? Or it makes so much sense that you feel that way right now. to validate people's emotional experiences as they're going through grief. So I love both of these books dearly for totally different reasons.
Yeah.
And you can find both on Amazon. You can also find them at your local bookstore. This one might take a little bit longer to order because this one was self-published and not traditionally published, but they are available all over the world. And if for some reason you can't find it where you are, please send me a message and I can get one out to you your way.
So, and you used to, I'm saying used to, maybe you're going to start again, lead cruises.
Oh, yes. This was a great time. I actually wrote about that in Permission to Grieve a little bit. Linda Findley hosts an organization called the Grieve Cruises, and I designed their website, so you can go over and check that out. They are hosting one, to the best of my knowledge, in December of this year. Okay. So this is when they believe that travel restrictions will be unlocked, especially for sailing. And what happens on a grief cruise, I presented on their 2019 cruise, is that you attend a cruise for anywhere from 3 days to 7 days. I believe this new one is 5 to 7 days. And you can do all the things on board. You can do all the things off board. You can do all the things as if you were on a traditional cruise. You can see the shows. You can go to the jazz performances. You can go to the restaurants. Everything is available to you. And then you can go to the offshore excursions. But then also during the day, from about 8 to 5 every single day, there are hours and hours of grief workshops. So you can attend grief workshops about God. You can attend grief workshops about grief in the body. You can attend workshops about yoga and Reiki and all these other things that can help with grief. You can do grief and mindfulness. And then there are breakout sessions at night where you gather into little circles based on who or what you lost. So loss of a child or loss of a spouse or divorce or things like that. And you can gather together and share stories specifically about that type of loss. And they form these circles for you. And then usually one night there will be something called what's called a night of remembrance, where there's a big ceremony for everyone who we've lost, including pets, on the deck of the ship. And because you can't hold real flame on a ship, A, it'll blow out, B, it's dangerous, harmful, not dangerous. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Words are still coming to the brain. Yeah. We hold these little LED fake candles, but we go for a full circle walk around the top deck of the ship at night when the stars are out, and it's beautiful. And we have kind of these little luminaries and then this devotional satchel filled with everyone's biodegradable pieces of paper with their names of their loved ones set on them, and we cast it off the back of the ship with the light trailing on it. And so you can see the light until it disappears into the sea, which is very, very, very pretty. And we all take pictures, and it's a beautiful experience to have. And then on top of all that, it's like you get to go on shore and ride the carousels or go. I went snorkeling for the first time when I was on this cruise, and it was such fun. And I got to meet podcast listeners from all over the world.
Oh, that's fun.
I had a woman from Netherlands just to be on the cruise next to me. I had a woman from Boston come, and we'd never met in person before, and the three of us just became like this the whole trip. And so you meet people who are willing to talk about grief and express it on this cruise. And if you tell them Shelby Forsythia sent you, you might get a little bit of a discount. So see what happens when you do. I believe it's December 2021 of this year, and Linda Findley, who runs it, is a travel planner and also a grieving mom who lost her daughter. And so it's like she's combined two of these professions together to create the grief cruises. And it's such a wonderful experience to go on. You meet a lot of cool people on that cruise.
Yeah, wow. I interviewed somebody, I haven't published her episode. It'll publish in the next week or two. But she was talking about how her husband had passed away and then what it was like when her son got married. And I hadn't really thought of that. Like, my son is getting married in August, and his dad died in December 2019. And I mean, I know his dad died, right? And I know his dad's not going to be there, but I'm glad that she mentioned that, because I think I would have just gone into the wedding being kind of naive,
Mm-hmm.
get kind of busy and don't think about it. Okay, here's the wedding. And then, so any advice?
Sure, absolutely. That's actually a really phenomenal question, because it's like, what the hell do you do at these big milestone events when this is never going to happen again, hopefully,
Right.
with marriage. And you are actively grieving at the event. He should be here. They should be here. we should all be together taking the pictures and doing, the ceremonial thing, something borrowed, something blue. I'm not sure what traditions you're incorporating into the wedding.
I don't know either.
But yeah, but something that's a part of it. I will tell you that I've had several cousins get married in the last 5 to 6 years now, probably, if I had to guess. And at each of their ceremonies, which have been in vastly different locations at vastly different times of year, they have had something that's called the empty chair, and they
Yeah.
put it in the front row. And they put framed photos of every single family member who can't attend the ceremony. And so when the people getting married are at the front, they can glance over and see all their humans there, witnessing the ceremony from wherever, whatever you
I
choose to
mentioned
believe.
it to my son.
But
He said that's
something
what
that's
they're doing. They're
but
doing that.
something that's incorporated to
Yeah.
we honor the fact that they are missing, we grieve the fact that they're not here. And because of those two truths, we have specifically set aside space for them.
Yeah.
Because one of the most loving things you can do for somebody that you have loved and lost is to make room for them in your life. And so to acknowledge that something happened as opposed to, again, self-rejection and
Right.
abandonment, to push it down, to cramp it down, to just say this doesn't matter, this shouldn't be a part of anything, we want to keep it nice and tidy. Grief doesn't do nice and tidy. Grief
No.
does, we need to tell the truth here
Yeah.
about what happened. And this could go as far as my sister got married amazingly about a month ago, and I was
Oh, wow.
as a part of it, and I designed her floral bouquet, which she requested to be of fake flowers. And we explicitly went on a hunt to Michael's for about 2 hours to look for flowers for this bouquet, and she knew she wanted peonies and blue thistle and berries and all these other neat flowers that went in there, but she explicitly said, "We have to have Queen Anne's lace," because Mom always told the story that if she could get remarried again and redo her bouquet because a family friend did it for free. It was kind of one of those things where they were cheap and Catholic on a farm town, and the dad was like, "Let's just get the cake and the flowers and everything for free." So it wasn't one of those things where she got to pick her own wedding.
Right.
She didn't get to DIY her own wedding. She said, "I always wanted a bouquet of Queen Anne's lace." And so when my sister got married, she incorporated, we found fake Queen Anne's lace, which I didn't even know that was a thing that existed. And I've been a florist for 4 years. Didn't even know that was a thing that existed. And we found it and put it in her bouquet. And on top of that, we also took a very, very tiny piece of it and put it on her husband's boutonniere so that he knew he was coming into a family that had lost a mother and could honor her as well as the people who he loved and lost in his own life. We put in some flowers for people he was grieving because he knows I do grief work. I'm like, this is very easy to talk about. Just tell me what flowers remind you of grieving people, and then and we'll just put them in the bouquet for you. So I mean, they can be done in traditions all the way from jewelry to the empty chair to flowers to, again, it's that permission to do, permission to do something out into the world that shows your grieving person, and then also permission to be. I am now a person who honors my grieving person at every major milestone. That's a new identity than pre-grief. Didn't have to think about doing that, didn't have to be that person. And now it's I am choosing to be this person as a result of my loss. And then also permission to feel. I have permission to feel all of the emotions that are going to come up with this, whether they're regret or remorse or nostalgia or aching or longing or even joy that can come up. I give myself permission to be happy on this day, on a day where maybe I shouldn't be happy.
Right.
I can allow this to be true as well. And on days like that, I find it especially helpful to use a tool that I call in Your Grief Your Way, the friendly anthropologist, where you pretend as if you are studying yourself as a human and with like a little notepad and stuff. And I was like, oh, look, the human is really sad when she hears Canon in D by Pachelbel. Because that's a song I played at a piano recital in 3rd grade for my mother, and she was in tears because she was envisioning my future wedding. And now every time I hear that at a wedding, I think of my mother and playing that song for her when I was 8 years old. And God, even right now, I kind of get like shaky chills thinking about it. It's like I am now a person who cries at Pachelbel Canon D, and oh, look, the human is upset by this, and that's okay. So like the friendly anthropologist comes in and validates all of your emotions for you.
Yeah.
But I refer to myself as the human. You can call yourself the subject or the, the experiencer of the emotion, or even, Emily, seems to really wish that she could be sitting next to him in the aisles right now instead of Uncle whoever, it's kind of, and that's okay. And so it's like
Yeah.
at the end of every sentence, and that's okay, and that's okay, and that's okay. Just a validating of you are allowed to feel whatever the hell comes up on this day, because
Yeah.
God knows it's going to come up. And be a
Yeah.
part of it. And something that might also be helpful is take the next couple of days off. Don't go back to work right away.
Right.
Or don't go, on the honeymoon trip. I anticipate you wouldn't
Yeah.
go on the honeymoon trip, but like don't go on a trip, or don't,
Yeah.
you could certainly gather together with friends, do like a fire pit thing, or like a processing, or you could just be alone for
Yeah.
the day. But to have a day where it's like, okay, I'm unpacking everything that happened, or I'm just resting
Yeah.
after everything happened.
We'll just go back to the normal routine.
And then go back to the normal routine like 3 days later. 3 is not the perfect number. If you want to take a whole week off, please do so. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, this might be overwhelming. And so a thing I can do to protect myself is give myself the space of time, make space, because the way we should be grieving people we love them is to make room for them.
Here's an interesting story that I wonder if you've heard a story like this, right? So we're going through the basement to clearing out his stuff, right? And my son is studying engineering in college. And so Bruce saved everything. I don't save everything. So he had all of his books from West Point down there in the basement. And so William's looking through the books, and he wasn't that much farther behind than me. And when I went to college, we didn't have computers either, and I went to the Naval Academy, right? So I studied engineering too. He's like, oh, look at how hard these, look at this differential equations book, and look at how hard it was when Dad went to college. I'm like, what about me?
You're like, this was equally hard. I don't know why you're making this comparison.
My books and stuff. I don't know. It's just kind of funny. It's like,
oh my gosh,
you don't feel appreciated. Like I did something.
Yeah.
Good too. I was in the 6th class of women to graduate.
Maybe I'll die and then you'll appreciate me.
Like, God, because he saved his West Point books.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, my dad's a big saver too, so I'm not necessarily looking forward to going through the day when we have to go through all of his stuff. Because my mom had a lot of stuff. She was a scrapbooker, and so there's albums and albums and albums and boxes of photos that we still have yet to go through.
Yeah.
And giving that permission to just take as long as it's going to take. Yeah. And also I know which of the two parents I'm dreading more to go through their stuff. I'm like, you save literally everything. And I am I don't know if you can tell this from the space that I'm in, but I'm such a minimalist.
Yeah.
That I'm not a very sentimental person, which is funny because I work in grief. So I'm heavily sentimental about very few things. And then I'm not sentimental really about anything else. I'm more than okay once I read a book. If I didn't like it, it goes to Goodwill or a thrift store or wherever it goes. Not a hanger-oner. But many people are hanger-oners.
Yeah,
and
he was.
that's a big result of it's a byproduct of grief.
Yeah, and one of the things that was sad though too is because my son was 25, my daughter was like 23 when he passed, and when you're a teenager and stuff, you're not always as interested in your parents as you might be when you become an adult, right?
Oh God, that's an understatement. I wish I was far more interested in my mother before she died. Yes. And I feel bad saying that, but also I was like, we had not come back to each other yet. Right. We had not returned to each other as people. We were still kind of working out the mother-daughter dynamic.
Right. And my son had, and his dad had issues, whatever. So it's like, then they're going through his stuff in the basement and notice these things like, oh, I didn't know he did this or he did that. And so it was sad to see him learn some things about his dad and my daughter too, to learn some things about their dad by going through his stuff that they would have probably learned and been more interested in as they got older.
Yeah. It's like the humanity part. It's like I suddenly get to see all these different lenses of you that I didn't know before. And now I regret not getting to know it in person while you're alive.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't feel guilty for that because just give yourself a break.
I've had some very similar discoveries with my mother's work, which is fascinating to me because I had an eating disorder after I came out of the closet. And then I found one of my mother's journals, I don't know, from like 1994. So my sister and I were like freshly born, and she was wrestling through a religious lens, her imagery of her own body as a woman in the world. And I was like, damn it, I wish I could have talked to you about this. Wow, what a conversation that would have been to have freed us both from both of them. And that's not necessarily my job, but like
Right.
to have returned and said, this is true for me too. This was true for you. How long has this been true in our lineage? Because I have no idea. And how, in what ways has this been true? What practices have we upheld, or stories have we told that we can stop lying to ourselves about, or being so cruel to our bodies? And then how can we free ourselves as women? Because this is not something that we need to carry. And gosh, I so wish I could have that conversation with her. And I'm also determined to, and a couple of my aunts have told me that she was getting there in terms of coming around to my sexuality.
Right.
How I love.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to have seen that day, because I died. Oh, Freudian slip. She died and I was angry at her. We were in the middle of a fight. We were not on good terms. And so to have her die in the middle of that conversation is still not a great regret, because I don't think I need to justify my anger necessarily. I think it's very valid. But also I wish there had been a little bit more fluffiness there, or sentiment, or nostalgia, or care, because I think I was too angry to really. I loved, but maybe not as hard as I could have. And that's hard to know and to have be true for the rest of my life.
Right. Kasia, thanks for all your posts. I know you're posting a lot of things from some things from the Bible, and you posted Psalm 34:18. So thank you for sharing. If anyone has any questions for Shelby, we're getting ready to wrap this up. If you have any questions, feel free to post them, and we'll work on answering them. Let's see. You've seen her books. This is her website, shelbyforsythia.com.
And you're way ahead of me. That's perfect. I was getting ready to say that.
Yeah. And so that's how people can reach out to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then your books, your Grieve Your Way and Permission to Grieve. And yep, there you go. And what's next?
I'm writing a third book right now, which I think the no driving thing is a call to return to. So I can't leave my house. I must have, everything delivered to me, or take the bus, which is okay with me. I love public transit. I just have to work out my timing and be okay being really early to things.
Right.
And there's really not many places to go right now with COVID. I'm not looking to explore many places, but I'm working on a third book right now, and I won't reveal the title, but it contains 3 teeny tiny phrases that I use with my clients that helps unlock experiences of grief in them. It's another way you give yourself permission to grieve, but through words and phrases. And so it's kind of a comforter's guide to assisting the grieving. It's not necessarily made for grievers, although you can use the 3 phrases on yourself if you'd like. You can self-comfort, but it's very much for nurses and pastors and funeral home directors and anybody who comes into intimate touch regularly with grieving people, and then also for everyday people, because you will eventually come into contact with somebody who's grieving. And people are always like, what do I say? What do I say to comfort the grieving? I'm like, here's what you say. And there's 3 different things for 3 different stories that grievers tell themselves in their heads. There's 3 different lies that we tell ourselves when we grieve. And these are things that inadvertently unlock the lies we tell ourselves in our head without saying the exact opposite. Because when you say the exact opposite, people are like, I just don't believe you. You're not on my side.
Right.
And so it's like a sneaky backdoor way of giving people permission to grieve. It's wonderful. So I'm really excited. I'm getting ready to submit the pitch, hopefully in the next 3 months when I can't drive. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that my brain will fully return to me, that I can focus on reading and writing. Even right now, being on a screen does not feel exhausting, which is nice. That's a nice change from the last 4 days, because every time I look at a screen, I feel tired. So yeah, I'm coming back around to what I always love to do. And then there are probably about 8 more books in my head that I intend to write before I die. I have a lot of goals, and I need to make a will. This whole experience has made me realize I need to make a will. I need to tell people who my business goes to. I need to tell people what happens with the cat and the money and, everything else that exists, all these possessions, the minimal amount of possessions that I have.
Yeah, but I just have my kids go through that too, because it's so important to have it, and you never know.
You never know. Well, and we were gracious enough to grow up in a family, my sister, me, and my dad, where we more or less accepted my mom's handwriting on a legal pad as her will. So like it was not even anything that was notarized or remotely legal, but because we're all relatively kind to each other, we trusted it and went with it. And people got what she said they dictated they got, and we played the songs at her funeral that she said she wanted played at her funeral, but it was all written on a legal pad. And I was like, I got to do something a little more polished than that.
Because it doesn't always work out that way where people get along. We didn't have an we had an issue. I'm not going to go into it, but we had an issue, and it was it's very painful to have to deal with that.
Yeah. Yes.
So well, I'm for one glad that you're still here. I'm thankful for you, and it's interesting. I mean, because we scheduled this a long time ago.
A long time ago. And who knew it would be the first interview after
grieving something different.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're in a different grief cycle on the day we did this interview.
Brand new one. Yeah, to the point where I'm still having dreams about what happened. So I'll be glad when those ease up on me too.
Take care of yourself.
This whole experience in here is, where does this file go?
Yeah.
What's the context around this? What will surround this eventually? Because right now it's just this. When you're staring down the thing that is just grief, it's like, I don't know what to do with this yet. Right. I need more, context, and I think it'll come.
I think
it'll, because it's come before.
Yeah, at least you've been through some, so you know a little bit about what to expect, I guess. But
yeah, that's the faith. That's the reality.
Well, I'm going to end the broadcast, but stay here and we'll just say goodbye when we're done.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much who attended tonight. And I'll sign off with the line that I use at the end of all of my podcasts, which is, because even through grief, we are growing.
Thank you, Shelby.
Thank you.